When 13-year-old Lily Parker appeared at the Hells Angels clubhouse in the middle of a rainy night, the entire biker room fell silent. Her torn clothes and fearful eyes told a story, but the words she spoke choked everyone up. "Please, kill my stepfather." What happened next turned a misunderstood group of bikers into real angels, and forever changed the life of one little girl along with the entire town. This is a story of courage, justice, and family. The heavy door of the Hells Angels Flagstaff chapter clubhouse swung open on a rainy night thick with downpour along Route 66, letting in a gust of cold wind and something no one in the room expected: a child. Lily Parker stood on the threshold, clothes torn to shreds, hair soaked and plastered to her face, bare feet purple and trembling from the cold. Conversations cut off abruptly. The pool game stopped mid-shot. Someone turned down the radio. 12 bikers scattered around the tables turned their heads, their eyes, those of men who had lived outside the law, suddenly going quiet at the sight of the 13-year-old girl who had just stepped into their world uninvited. Rick Hawk Dalton, the chapter president, set down his coffee mug. His eyes, old but still sharp as a knife, locked onto the small face at the door, and he saw it. A purple bruise stretching along her left cheekbone, fresh enough that the edges still gleamed red. "You lost, kid," his voice rumbled, gravelly and dry as stone. Lily didn't answer. Her lips trembled, eyes filled with tears, then broke into a short sentence choked in her throat. "Please kill my stepfather." The entire room froze. No one moved, only the rain pounding relentlessly on the tin roof. Hawk slowly stood up, shrugged off his leather jacket and walked over. He draped the jacket over the girl's shoulders, the smell of leather, rain and gasoline mixing together. His voice lowered, not harsh, just absolute certainty. "We don't kill, kid. We protect." Lily looked up, eyes half believing, half afraid. Hawk bent down, gently placed a hand on her shoulder, then led her deeper inside. The makeshift medical room at the end of the hallway lit up under a yellow bulb. Joanne "Joe" Carter, a female biker and retired Army nurse, quickly spread out a towel and examined the bruises on Lily's arms and neck. "Who did this to you?" Joe asked softly. Lily just shook her head, lips dry and cracked, hands still clutching a silver necklace with a photo of her deceased father, Michael Parker, a Marine killed in Fallujah. Hawk leaned against the doorframe, his eyes softening, asking quietly, "Why did you come to us?" Lily looked up, voice as faint as a breath. "Because he's a cop. Nobody will believe me." A bolt of lightning tore through the sky outside, flashing light across Hawk's face. He said nothing for a few seconds, just clenched his fist. Finally, he looked at Joe, then at the girl, saying in a firm, deep voice heavy as an oath, "Then we'll make them believe." Dawn spread a pale band of light over Route 66, the road still slick with last night's rain reflecting the shadows of the Harleys roaring through the morning mist. 12 bikers rode in formation like a steel escort, engines blending into one, echoing across the slopes of Flagstaff. In the middle of the pack, a silver pickup truck carried Lily in the back with Joe. The girl curled up in Hawk's oversized leather jacket, eyes half closed watching the first light pierce through the fogged window. Joe held her hand tightly, the thick warm hand of someone who had stitched up soldiers on the battlefield, now the only anchor for a lost child. "You're safe now, okay?" she said softly. Lily just nodded, lips trembling, then looked out at the Harleys gleaming gold in the mist, the crystalline dawn light and metal blending into a strange scene, fierce yet peaceful. Hawk led the pack at the front, headlights cutting straight through the early haze, his black helmet reflecting the sunrise like a sign of faith. He didn't look back, but through the rearview mirror, Hawk kept watch over the truck carrying Lily, guarding that fragile life with everything he still believed in. When the convoy stopped at the gates of Banner Health, Flagstaff doctors and nurses were already waiting, bewildered by the sight of dozens of bikers quietly parking in a row. No noise, no challenge, just standing and watching the girl being carried inside. Joe walked to the reception desk, her voice calm and clear. "I'm the temporary guardian. Her name is Lily Parker." The young nurse glanced at the tattoos and leather, then nodded and quickly called the doctor. Lily was placed on the examination bed, fluorescent lights shining down on her face still streaked with rain. The doctor bent down and sighed. "There are old injuries too," he said quietly. "Some scars have healed, others are fresh." Joe gently squeezed Lily's hand, trying to keep her calm. The girl didn't cry, just stared at the ceiling where the white light blotched like memories. Hawk stood in the hallway, arms crossed over his chest, eyes fixed on the closed door. His face as if anyone touched that door, he'd tear the whole building apart. A few security staff peeked, hesitated, but no one dared approach. The atmosphere in the hospital was unusually heavy, not from engine noise but from the suppressed silence. When the surgical lights went out, Jo stepped out, removing her gloves, face serious. "Is the kid okay?" Hawk asked, voice low and short. Jo looked at him, eyes glistening. "It's not the first time," she said softly, voice hoarse. Hawk was silent for a few seconds, face hardening. He turned to look at the parking lot where the morning mist was lifting, the sun rising from the San Francisco peaks, his hand clenched, knuckles cracking. "Then it's the last," he replied quietly, but each word heavy as steel. Behind him, Jo took a deep breath, knowing this man had just made a vow, not as a biker, but as a father who had seen too much evil in life to let one more exist without paying the price. The engines outside started up again, roaring like a commitment sent straight into the morning. Their journey wasn't over. Rumors spread faster than wind across the Arizona high plateau. Hell's Angels protecting a girl at Banner Hospital. The headline appeared on the local news site just hours after the convoy stopped. That afternoon, the hospital air was thick with curiosity and tension. Doctors, nurses, patients, everyone whispered about the group of bikers standing guard outside the hallway like a living wall. But when the news reached Mark Benson, everything turned dangerous. He showed up at noon, his police cruiser cutting through the crowd like a predator hunting prey. 2 officers cleared the way while he strode straight into the treatment area, face a mix of anger and the smugness of someone used to wielding power like a weapon. Hawk was leaning against the wall, coffee cup in hand, eyes tracking his every step. When Mark saw him, he smirked condescendingly. "I hear someone's obstructing police business. I'm just here to take the kid home." His voice was cold as steel. Hawk didn't budge. "The girl's under doctor's care. She's not going anywhere." Mark stepped closer, index finger jabbing into Hawk's leather chest. "She's confused," he said, a half smile appearing. "She fell off her bike." Hawk stared him down, voice gravelly and low. "You're not getting near her." The words echoed in the hallway like a gunshot. The 2 accompanying officers tensed, hands on their holsters, while other bikers appeared from both ends of the hall, silent but present enough to thicken the air. Jo, who was in the on-duty medical room, heard the noise, stepped out holding a clipboard, eyes flicking to Hawk, then stopping on Mark. "I'm the temporary guardian," she said, voice even and hard. "The girl is injured. You have no right to see her." Mark narrowed his eyes, took another step, voice lowering to almost a growl. "If you don't give her to me, I'll have your clubhouse shut down. I'll make sure every last one of you loses your license to breathe." Jo, with the calm of someone who had heard bullets whistle past her ear, tilted the pen clip to her clipboard. A small click sounded. Recording had started. Hawk said nothing, just looked at Mark as if weighing whether he had any humanity left. But Mark just spat on the floor, turned on his heel and left. The 2 officers following. The sound of his boots echoed down the tile to the end of the hall. When the door closed, Jo stepped forward, holding the pen out to Hawk, light catching her cold smile. "I think we just got enough to choke him." Hawk nodded. No more words. He pulled the walkie-talkie from his belt, pressed the button, voice low and calm like distant thunder. "Call the brothers. We stand guard tonight." Outside, the Harleys started up, their sound like the storm's reply. The Flagstaff sky was overcast gray, rain drizzling, and in the wet courtyard in front of the hospital, black leather figures gradually appeared under the streetlights, men the world had called outlaws, now silently standing in line, waiting for night to fall to protect a child who had just escaped hell. Late afternoon, the Flagstaff sky turned brassy gray, heavy clouds hanging low over the San Francisco peaks like a warning of a new storm. But this time, the storm didn't come from the sky. It came from the road. The first engine sound rose at the end of Route 66, low, long, and powerful like thunder rising from the earth. Then the second, the third, until the ground shook. 100 bikers from across Arizona poured in. Phoenix, Prescott, Tucson, Yuma, group by group joining the line in front of Banner Health's gates. Chrome reflected the sunset, exhaust pipes blending into a heavy metal symphony that made anyone hearing it shudder. Local residents, initially just curious onlookers, now stood frozen. They had never seen anything like it. 100 Harleys lined up, headlights blazing, rain-slicked tires reflecting the dusk like rows of swords. Press crowded in, cameras panning non-stop. A reporter from the Arizona Daily Sun whispered into his mic, Hell's Angels protect 13-year-old abuse victim. The phrase spread like lightning, then flooded social media, stirring the whole town. A few locals brought coffee to the bikers. Some kids hid behind their moms, pointing and whispering, "Angels." Hawk stepped forward, his faded black jacket flapping in the wind, eyes cold as a blade. He didn't need a mic. When Hawk's voice rang out, it cut through the roaring engines. "We're not here to fight the law. We're here to remind it what justice looks like." The words fell heavy and resonant like a hammer strike. No one answered, but silent nods passed through the ranks like a signal. Joe stood near the hospital door, looking out at the sea of bikes and lights, something between pride and fear in her eyes. Pride because they had become a wall between the girl and the devil. Fear because she knew anything touching true justice came at a cost. A middle-aged local in a wool jacket stepped up, hand on Hawk's shoulder. "Who's the kid?" he asked quietly. Hawk answered without taking his eyes off the hospital gate. "Just a kid who needed someone to show up." As he finished speaking, in the distance, police lights flashed. 2 patrol cars pulled up, the duty officer stepping out, flustered by the sight before him. 100 big tattooed men in leather standing silent in formation. No disruption, no challenge, just staring straight at them. The weight of that silence made the officers hesitate. One raised his radio, said something quickly, then withdrew. Internal police radio buzzed, "Stand down, do not engage," because they knew touching the Hells Angels now meant touching the entire burning public opinion. From the 3rd floor of the hospital, Lily looked out through the glass, seeing the bike lights reflect on the road like 100 flames. She didn't understand everything happening, only felt one thing: she was no longer alone. Joe placed a hand on her shoulder, smiling. "They came, kiddo." Just like Hawk said. Outside, a few people started clapping, then more. The clapping spread through the crowd, blending with the engine roar into a sound both fierce and sacred. Hawk didn't smile, just bowed his head slightly, like an answer. A few bikers raised their coffee cups, clinking them in silence. "To the girl," one said quietly. "To the Angels," another replied. Behind them, the words "Hell's Angels" Flagstaff on their backs stood out in the fading sunset, blazing like an unofficial flag of justice. As the last sunlight vanished behind the mountains, 100 engines started up together, not to leave but to warn. They would stay. The whole town heard that sound, the roar from the hearts of those once lost, now carrying a mission greater than themselves. In the echoing engines across the valley, Joe turned to Hawk, her voice lost in the noise. "What do you think they'll do?" Hawk looked toward the hospital, eyes steadfast. "They'll understand. Justice isn't just in the courtroom. Sometimes it wears leather and runs on gasoline." And as the first raindrops fell, the crowd still hadn't left. Someone shouted, "God bless the Angels." The clapping rose again, louder, steadier. On the hospital balcony, Lily looked down, hand pressed to the cold glass, eyes welling with tears. Down there among hundreds of bike lights, one man looked up, meeting her gaze. Hawk raised his hand in a slight salute, then turned back, signaling the brothers. 100 men planted their feet on the road, tapped their boots in rhythm, then revved their engines at once. That sound was no longer a threat. It was a promise. In the hospital, the pale yellow morning light filtered through the curtains, reflecting on the small, pallid face amid the white bandage streaks. Lily woke from a sleep heavy as stone, her mind hazy, hearing the muffled sound echoing from afar. She turned toward the window, where the glass still held the night's fog, and suddenly realized the engine noise was still rumbling steadily, blending into the giant heartbeat of the entire city. "They came," she whispered, voice weak but clear, like a confirmation to herself. Joe sat by the bed, eyes ringed dark after the long night, gently taking Lily's small hand, smiling tiredly but warmly. "Always," she replied, just one word but holding everything words couldn't express. Outside, the hospital hallway was packed. A group of police officers was arguing with the hospital manager about dispersing the disorderly bikers. Hawk stood quietly at the end of the line, eyes watching every movement, saying nothing. His brothers lined the hallway, leather jackets soaked with rain, arms crossed over chests, eyes cold but calm. They hadn't come to fight, they'd come to keep a promise. As the lead inspector raised his radio to give the order, a voice rang out from behind, gravelly but full of authority. "Stand down, you don't have jurisdiction here." Everyone turned. A middle-aged man with salt and pepper beard, wearing a leather jacket with Olo prominent on the chest, stepped forward. Sam Law Turner, former police officer, now a biker from the Phoenix chapter, slowly pulled a sealed file from his pocket. He opened it in front of the officers, his voice low, steady, and cold, as a blade honed by experience. Protective custody order for minor witness, signed this morning by Coconino County Court. That girl is a witness in an abuse investigation. You touch her, you touch the court. A young officer glanced at the paper, lips tightening. You're kidding, a biker with a court order. Sam looked at him, eyes both mocking and steadfast. Bikers know the law because we used to write it. Now step aside. No one said another word. The police withdrew gradually, only a few staying behind, standing against the wall, looking out the window where the biker wall remained intact. They still stood there, no shouting, no signs, just silent, heads slightly bowed, rain falling steadily on leather shoulders. Water streaked down the Hells Angels logos, blending with the color of steel and oil. A middle-aged woman brought coffee, set it on the railing, voice trembling, for the Angels. Hawk just nodded. A young reporter live streaming at the gate, voice shaking with emotion. They're calling it now. The Angel Stand. 100 bikers standing in the rain, guarding one girl no one else would protect. Those words traveled far through every device, every phone screen, becoming a symbol for an entire wet morning. On the third floor, Lily listened as Joe recounted it, eyes glistening. They're still out there, she asked softly. Joe nodded. Not just them, the whole town. In the room across the hall, an elderly man looked out the window, pulled out his phone, snapped the scene below. Hundreds of Harleys parked neatly, headlights reflecting off the misty sky like a metal galaxy. He sent the photo to his son far away, short caption, maybe angels do wear leather after all. Down below, Hawk still stood in his spot, eyes turned up to the third-floor window. When he saw Lily's silhouette press against the glass, he raised his hand slightly, saluting with 2 fingers. The girl responded. A small gesture but enough to light their whole world against the encroaching darkness. Outside, the rain grew heavier, but no one in the biker line moved. Each man, like a rock rooted in the current, bike lights casting a hazy halo through the mist around them. That scene, with all its silence and strength, entered the town's history as proof that compassion can roar louder than any gunshot. And in the hospital room, Lily gently closed her eyes, smiled, whispered through her still weak breath, "They didn't forget me." Joe squeezed her hand, replied softly, "No, sweetheart, they never forget the ones they ride for." Night fell over Flagstaff, heavy as a wet blanket. The rain had stopped, but the hospital air still carried the scent of metal and unresolved tension. Hawk sat in the small staff break room, before him a stack of medical files Joe had just retrieved from storage. The desk lamp's pale yellow light reflected on his face, etching the lines of a man who had lived his whole life on the front lines of good and evil. He flipped through the pages, eyes stopping at the bold line, "Patient Lily Parker, previous record attached. Deceased Emily Parker, mother, cause of death, vehicular accident, driver Mark Benson." Hawk paused, his finger tightening on the paper's edge, as if each letter were a shard of glass cutting skin. He looked up at Joe, leaning against the cabinet, arms crossed. "She died in a car crash, driven by him." Hawk read slowly, voice gravelly, as if speaking to himself. "Report says lost control in the rain. No suspicion." Joe frowned. No suspicion. A police officer loses control, wife dies, and no one investigates. Hawk nodded slightly, a dry laugh. This town knows how to protect its own. The door opened softly. A middle-aged woman in nurse's scrubs stepped in, face hesitant. "Rick Dalton?" she asked quietly. Hawk stood. "That's me. Who are you?" She extended her hand, voice low. "Karen Morales. I used to work with Emily Parker, Lily's mother. She was my friend." Joe immediately gave her the chair. Karen looked around, then lowered her voice. "She told me she wanted to leave Mark. She was scared, didn't say much, but I saw bruises on her wrists that day, the day she died. She was planning to leave. Mark found out and chased her. An hour later her car went off the road, into a ditch. Police called it an accident, but I know it wasn't." The room fell silent, only the clock ticking. Joe leaned down, voice hoarse. "He killed her, and now he's after the kid." Hawk looked out the window, through the wet glass. Light from the hundreds of Harleys reflecting on the ceiling, casting flickering streaks like a galaxy of justice waiting to awaken. He stood, walked to the window, his shadow merging with the lights outside. "He thinks the badge protects him," he said, voice low, but each word forged steel. "We'll show him what real honor looks like." Joe looked at him, recognizing that gaze. The gaze of a man who had buried friends in the sand, who had seen justice twisted so much he had to take up arms to demand it back. Hawk turned to Karen. Can you testify? Karen hesitated, hands clutching her scrub hem. If I do, he'll know. I have a young child. Joe stepped closer, hand on her shoulder. We won't let him touch you. None of us will allow it. Karen looked at Hawk, seeing in his eyes something few had ever seen, faith without needing promises. She nodded slowly but decisively. I'll speak. Hawk took the file, folded it carefully, voice dropping. We'll need more evidence. Traffic cams, witnesses, anything left. Joe smiled faintly, voice tinged with irony. You forget I was an army medic. I know how to find what people try to hide. Hawk nodded. Good. Tonight we start. Outside, wind rose again, blowing through the rows of Harleys parked straight before the hospital gate, leather jackets soaked from the previous night's rain reflecting streetlights like armor. A few passers-by stopped to take pictures, not knowing that inside the building, a 2-year buried secret was rising from the dark. Hawk opened his radio, spoke softly. Law check old police files. I want to know who signed the accident report 2 years ago. Sam Turner's voice replied, even in cold, Roger that. I'll dig. Hawk closed the radio, looked at Joe. If everything's as I think, he said, then tonight that badge won't be a symbol of law anymore but of guilt. Joe didn't answer, just turned away, put on her jacket, eyes toward the still blazing bike lights. You know, Rick, she said quietly, when I was in the military, I thought justice was in reports, statements, red stamps. Now I think different. It's here. She placed her hand on her chest. Hawk followed her gaze, nodded slightly, voice lowering almost to a whisper. And tonight justice will ride on 2 wheels. That night, the Flagstaff sky hung heavy black clouds pressing close to the pine tops like a warning of another storm. This one not of nature, but of men. From afar, patrol car lights flashed like predator eyes lurking in the dark. Mark Benson led the police convoy, his SUV roaring into Banner Hospital's parking lot, braking hard, tires screeching on the still wet asphalt, splashing murky water. He stepped out, raincoat not yet covering his badge, voice booming through the loudspeaker. This is a lawful arrest. You are illegally detaining a minor citizen. Inside the hospital, Hawk and Joe watched through the ground floor window, red and blue police lights reflecting on white walls, creating flickering streaks between reality and nightmare. Hawk said nothing, just turned and walked away. Outside, 100 bikers were ready. Engines roared in unison, sound like thunder rebounding off the ground. They lined up before the hospital gate, each Harley straight, headlights on, metal gold blending with police red, creating a scene half fierce, half sacred. Passers-by stopped, filming on phones, the night's breath mingling with the steady engine pulse like justice's heartbeat. Mark advanced, face flushed with rage, 2 officers behind. I'll arrest every one of you for obstructing an officer, he roared. Hawk stepped forward, slowly, each step heavy as a drumbeat. Rain began to fall, big cold drops, but no one in the biker line moved. Leather jackets darkened with water, boots flooded, but those eyes stayed fixed in one direction. Hawk stopped a few meters from Mark, voice low even, no need to shout, but each word cutting through the rain. You want her? You'll have to arrest every one of us first. Mark laughed, the sound twisted with madness. You think I won't? I'll bury you biker trash with that kid. Joe, under the hospital awning, pulled out her phone, fingers moving fast, screen light reflecting on her face. In seconds, the recording of Mark's threats from the day before went live on social media, along with hallway camera footage Sam Turner had uploaded. Mark's voice blared through hundreds of phones. If you don't give her to me, I'll have your clubhouse shut down. I'll make sure every last one of you loses your license to breathe. The crowd erupted, reporters filming, camera flashes popping non-stop. Mark heard his own voice echoing in the night, face paling, then turning purple. Who the hell? He shouted, drawing his gun, hand shaking between rage and fear. But before he could aim, 2 sleek black Arizona State Police vehicles screeched in, blue lights flashing, doors flew open. 3 troopers emerged, bulletproof vests marked State Police. Drop the weapon, Benson. One barked. We have a warrant for your arrest for obstructing an investigation and threatening a witness. Mark froze, rain slapping his face, eyes flickering desperation. You've been tricked. I'm the police. 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 Another trooper tackled him, cuffing his hands behind his back, the cold click echoing in the rain. Reporters pushed forward, snapping photos, flashes relentless. Mark thrashed, screaming in final madness. You can't fight the system. Hawk approached, boots splashing through puddles, footsteps steady as fate's countdown. He stopped before Mark, pinned to the ground, eyes no longer angry, but holding the pity of someone who knew the price of sin too well. His voice low, firm, calm. We didn't. We fixed it. Rain still fell, mingling with the engines roaring across the lot. The bikers raised their hands in salute, gesture solemn as a ritual. Headlights pierced the rain, illuminating the hospital gate where the banner health sign was now surrounded by the glow of hundreds of Harleys. In that moment, all prejudice vanished. No longer bikers, no longer police, only the fragile line between right and wrong, redrawn by engine roar, by silence, and by a little girl sleeping peacefully on the third floor, where justice had just been reborn. The next morning the rain had stopped, leaving puddles on the road reflecting a silver-gray sky. News spread across Arizona. Police officer Mark Benson detained on charges of abuse and murder. The entire town of Flagstaff was stunned, not just by the exposed crimes, but by how justice was delivered, not with handcuffs and guns, but with the courage of those society once feared. In the hospital, Lily sat by the window, early sunlight filtering through curtains, shining on her pale but peaceful face. She had slept through the night, the first time in months without waking from nightmares. Joe entered, carrying a tray of pastries and a mug of hot cocoa. "You have visitors this morning," she said. Lily tilted her head to look outside. In the courtyard, a few bikers were parking, carrying large paper bags, some with teddy bears, some with comic books, all smiling. One of them, a big guy with a long beard, waved at the girl, holding up a box. "Chocolate muffins, little angel." Lily laughed, the first laugh in months. Joe smiled softly, handed her the cocoa. "See, you're not alone anymore." In the days that followed, bikers took turns standing guard. They set up a small tent before the hospital gate, rotating shifts, some brewing coffee, some just sitting reading the paper, all keeping the atmosphere calm. Every morning Lily saw them, rain-soaked, tired, but always there. One brought her a small leather jacket, embroidered on the back with Angel's daughter. She hugged it tight, eyes lighting up as if reclaiming part of herself. Reporters gathered in growing numbers, wanting to hear the story of the girl and the Harley-riding angels. The phrase "the angel's daughter" began appearing on TV and articles and spread quickly, but Hawk disliked the noise. He avoided cameras, only agreeing to an interview on the local news channel when Joe persuaded him. The makeshift studio was set up in the hospital grounds, lights shining on the weathered face of a man who had spent his life on the roads. The reporter asked, "What can you say about the girl you protected?" Hawk was silent a moment, looking down at his calloused hands. Then he said, voice gravelly but steady, "She's family now, not by blood, but by choice." Just 5 words, but they rang in the room like a manifesto. Joe stood outside, listening through the speaker, eyes welling with tears, because she knew, for Hawk, family was never said lightly. It was something he had lost long ago, and now in that small child, he had found it again. When the interview ended, Hawk stepped out, saw Lily waiting. She ran to him, hugged him, the oversized leather jacket covering half her body. "I heard everything," she said softly. Hawk smiled, gently stroking her mist-damp hair. "Yeah, I like how you said by choice." She looked up, eyes bright as morning sun. "Because I choose you too." Hawk was silent, his hand tightening slightly on her shoulder. "Good," he said, voice thickening. "That's a choice I'll protect for the rest of my life." From the third-floor window, nurses watched the scene, some smiling. The hospital was no longer the heavy place it had been. In the hallways, instead of fear, people began talking about courage, about standing up for what's right. Outside, the Harley Rows still parked straight, but no longer roaring fiercely. They were silent, like sentinels of light. Joe passed by, saw at the patient table, Lily writing something in a small notebook. "Keeping a journal?" she asked. Lily nodded, then held up the page, scrawled but neat handwriting. "Sometimes angels wear leather and sometimes family is found on the road." Joe chuckled softly, ruffled her hair. "You really are their daughter now." At the end of the hall, Hawk leaned against the door, watching the scene through the glass. He said nothing, just quietly put on his helmet, then stepped outside where the morning wind blew through the pines. Each footstep rang steady, sure, like the beat of a heart reviving after a long storm. A month later, when Banner Hospital officially allowed Lily's discharge, Hawk and Joe took her to a new place, an old military housing area on the southern edge of Flagstaff, where the bikers had spent weeks renovating into a small community. On the wooden gate, A steel sign gleamed in the sun. The Haven. Each house was repainted, flowers planted, rows of small flags fluttering in the wind. It wasn't just a home for bikers, but a place for the wounded to find themselves again. Lily stood before the small brick house with the green porch, still clutching the leather jacket embroidered Angel's daughter. Hawk placed a hand on her shoulder. "Welcome home." She said nothing, just looked around, eyes sparkling in the early sun. In the yard, a few bikers were welding steel frames, others repairing engines. Joe stood by an old disassembled Harley, wrench in hand, voice ringing out, "Hey kid, today we're not talking about the past anymore. Now learn how to make something run again." Lily approached curiously, eyeing the scattered parts. Joe handed her oversized gloves. "First, learn to mix oil. Don't dump the whole can on the floor like Hawk did when he started." Hawk, listening from afar, just laughed, cigarette smoke trailing white in the sun. Joe bent down, showed Lily how to open the cap, measure ratios, then mix evenly. The girl's small hands trembled at first, but when the dark oil began flowing in perfect proportion, her eyes gradually lit up. Joe pointed to the frame where bolts were still loose. "Now the hardest part, tighten it solid. Everything in life, if you don't hold tight, it falls apart." Lily nodded, face streaked with oil, but a small smile blooming. All that day they worked together, saying little, just the sound of metal tools, birds, and occasional short laughs. When the sun dipped behind the mountains, Lily inserted the key, took a deep breath. Joe nodded. "Go." The girl twisted the throttle. The engine purred, then roared to life. The old Harley revived, white smoke puffing from the exhaust, the smell of oil and hot metal filling the air. Joe laughed loud, arms wide in the wind. "See, you fix engines the same way you fix yourself, piece by piece." Lily looked at her, eyes shining with pride. "Then maybe one day I'll run smooth too." Joe smiled, ruffled her hair. "You're already running, kiddo. You just haven't noticed yet." That evening, the Haven glowed with lights. Everyone gathered around the campfire, eating burgers and telling long road stories. Lily sat in the circle, listening to tales from those the world had misunderstood, now laughing together under the stars. An old biker told of sleeping 3 nights in the desert to avoid fighting police. Another said he was once saved by Hawk in a blizzard. Lily didn't understand everything, but she felt one thing. Everyone here carried scars, and those scars bound them into a family. After dinner, Hawk handed her a flashlight. "If anything scares you, turn it on. Here, even a little light, someone will show up." She smiled, nodded. When night fell, Lily sat alone on the porch, house lights casting golden glow through the curtains. Far off, engine sounds rose, not fierce as before but steady, fading, like the road's lullaby. She pulled the jacket closer, wind carrying pine resin and gasoline. For the first time in her life, Lily wasn't afraid of the dark. She closed her eyes gently, whispered, "Piece by piece," then smiled. Overhead, a band of stars stretched across the mountain peaks, reflecting in her eyes like beacons of faith, small but enduring, and bright enough to guide the way home. On a May morning, the Coconino County Court was packed with people. The entire town of Flagstaff almost came to a halt to witness the trial everyone had been waiting for. The trial of former police officer Mark Benson, once praised as a community protector, now facing charges of murdering his wife, abuse, and assault on a minor. Outside the courthouse gates, dozens of reporters crowded, cameras pointed at the steps where over 100 bikers stood in line, leather jackets reflecting the sunlight, the Hells Angels Flagstaff logo prominent on their backs like a wordless declaration. Lily, in a light blue dress and white shoes, sat in the front row, Joe beside her, hand tightly holding hers as if passing on courage. Hawk sat behind, back straight, eyes never leaving the defendant's chair where Mark sat, his old uniform now just a shadow of lost power. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. "State versus Mark Benson," the clerk's voice rang out. Decisive, the trial began. The prosecutor presented, "We have evidence showing the defendant physically and mentally abused his wife's stepchild and was involved in his wife's death 2 years ago." Medical files were placed on the table. Photos of injuries, doctors' reports, each bruise becoming undeniable evidence. When the prosecutor played the recording, Mark's voice echoed through the room. "If you don't give her to me, I'll have your clubhouse shut down." The courtroom buzzed. Some locals stood, whispering angrily. Mark looked up, face flushed. "That's edited," he shouted, but his voice trembled. Joe was called to the witness stand. She recounted the rainy night, When Lily was brought to the hospital, when the injuries on the girl made nurses turn away, she pointed at Mark, her voice steady though eyes glistening. I've seen the look of someone who just caused pain, and that night it was on his face. Next was Karen Morales, the nurse who had kept the secret for 2 years. She spoke of Emily Parker, the murdered friend of Mark chasing her car that night, and what she had hidden out of fear. Today, Karen said, I stand here because she no longer has the chance to speak. The courtroom was silent. Only the scratch of the clerk's pen. Hawk was called last. He stepped up, tall, solid, staring straight at Mark. You thought you could use the badge to bury your sins, but a badge doesn't turn lies into honor. Mark gave a weak laugh, leaning back in his chair. Who are you to lecture me on honor? A bunch of criminal bikers. Hawk didn't respond, just looked at him, eyes so cold Mark had to turn away. The prosecutor signaled the technician played new video, security footage from the hospital night. Mark threatened the doctors. The images were clear frame by frame, him roaring, pointing at Joe, yelling, You'll regret this. I'll burn that clubhouse to the ground. A collective gasp filled the room. All eyes turned to the defendant. Mark paled, tried to say I was set up. She wanted fame, but no one believed him anymore. The prosecutor closed the file, voice firm. No one wants fame from a murderer. The defense attorney shook his head. Nothing left to say. The judge banged the gavel. The jury has considered all evidence, testimony, and the defendant's defense, verdict. Guilty of second-degree murder, child abuse, and abuse of power in the line of duty. The air froze. Mark slumped, lips moving, eyes lost as if he couldn't believe everything had collapsed. The judge looked straight at him, voice ringing like steel. The court sentences 20 years in prison. In that moment silence enveloped, only the wind whistling through the windows. Then from the courthouse yard, the familiar sound echoed in vroom, vroom, vroom. 100 Harley engines started in unison, the roar spreading through the streets like thunder in a clear sky. Inside, Mark jumped up, screaming madly, You won't win. I am the law. I am. The engine roar drowned everything. Hawk turned to the window, golden light from hundreds of headlights pouring in, reflecting on the glass, a faint smile almost peaceful on his face. Lily sat beside Joe, gripping her hand, eyes following the light, feeling the ground vibrate, not with fear, but with the heartbeat of justice. As Mark was escorted out, he yelled hopelessly amid the storm-like engine noise. The bikers didn't cheer, didn't mock, just stood straight, silent, eyes toward the courthouse where justice had been spoken. When the prison van sped away, the hundreds of bikers revved in unison, the rolling thunder drowning the clank of metal, drowning the screams of the man who had lost everything. The press reported that afternoon, Hell's Angels roar for justice, engines drown the sound of guilt. In the courthouse backyard, Hawk removed his helmet, looked up at the clear sky. It's over, Joe said, stepping closer. He nodded. For her maybe, for us it's just the start. He looked down the road where Lily stood among the biker brothers, wind tossing her hair, eyes shining in the crowd, and in the final echo of the Harleys, Flagstaff understood the storm had passed, leaving a different season of sun, one of justice and compassion, written in gasoline, steel, and the hearts of those once lost but who had found the meaning of honor again. A year later, spring greened the hills around Flagstaff again, and life, thought shattered, began stitching itself back together. Lily Parker, now 14, hair longer, eyes brighter, still wore her father's silver necklace as a reminder she had survived the storm. She returned to school, carrying a new smile and faith she never had before. Curious stares and initial whispers faded as people realized she was no longer the trembling girl from before. She was a symbol of strength, of belief that compassion could be greater than fear. After school, Lily joined the new volunteer program the bikers started, called Ride for Her. The project, led by Joe and Hawk, was a network helping abused children, providing shelter, counseling, and truly safe arms. Every weekend, the bikers set out, Harleys in formation carrying toys, books, warm clothes to small towns across Arizona. On every helmet was the sticker, For Her. At first, many thought it was just a slogan, but to them it was a promise to a girl who had dared to stand up. Lily didn't just participate, she became the heart of it. She told her story at school talks, where children sat quietly, many enduring what she once had. I used to be afraid, Lily said at a community meeting, voice trembling but firm. But then I learned strength isn't being fearless. It's keeping going even when scared, because someone believes in you. Joe listened from the back of the room, tears at the corners of her eyes but a proud smile on her lips. Hawk stood beside her, arms crossed, nodding slightly. After the meeting, Lily handed Joe a small envelope, saying, "I wrote this a while ago. Now I'm ready to give it to you." Joe opened it. Inside a handwritten letter, neat slanted script. "You taught me that being strong isn't being fearless, it's being loved." Below the words was a small photo, Lily in the middle of the bikers at her 8th grade graduation, beaming jacket reading "Angel's Daughter." Joe gently ran her hand over the paper, eyes blurring. "This kid," she whispered, "making me cry again." That afternoon, Joe returned to Angel's Haven, the center now expanded, welcoming more new children. On the main wall hung countless photos of saved faces, children once forgotten, now smiling in the sun. Joe stepped up, hung Lily's photo in the center, next to a metal sign, "Angel's Haven, where healing begins." Afternoon light poured through the window, reflecting on the glass, turning the photo into a small frame of light. She stood quietly for a few seconds, then turned at the sound of a Harley approaching from afar. Hawk was coming, bringing a few newcomers, a group of children rescued from another bad place. Joe nodded slightly, knowing in her heart this journey would never end. She placed her hand on the photo, voice blending with the wind. "You did good, Lily, and I promise we'll keep going, until no child has to beg for help in the night." Somewhere out there, Lily was riding behind a female biker, leather jacket flapping in the wind, smiling at the steady engine roar. She was no longer a victim, she was the spark. Every time the convoy passed, people stopped, waved. Children ran after shouting, "The angels are coming," and on the endless road under Arizona's blazing sun, the Harleys blended into a symphony of freedom. Lily looked back, her eyes catching the sun reflecting on chrome, and in that moment, she understood. Pain was no longer a wound, but a mark of what she had overcome. Joe finished hanging the photo, looked up. "They fixed her," she said softly. "And she fixed us." Hawk stepped beside her, hand on her shoulder. "None of us are truly saved," he replied. "We just learn to save others to forgive ourselves." Joe smiled, looked at the photo one last time, then left the room, Lily's letter in her pocket. Outside, the sun was setting behind the red peaks, Harley sounds fading, echoing through the valley, like the heartbeat of hundreds who had chosen to build a kinder world together. The Angel's Haven Foundation Inauguration Day arrived in summer's golden sunlight, when all of Flagstaff seemed wrapped in a different air, not curiosity or doubt, but faith. The central yard was covered in flags, Harleys parked neatly on both sides of the path, chrome gleaming under the clear sky. On the large sign hung at the gate were the words, "Built by the road, saved by compassion." Inside, hundreds, residents, reporters, students, nurses, doctors, and bikers crowded together. Hawk, in his old worn shoulder jacket, stood quietly at the very back, helmet in hand. Joe stepped to the stage, hair tied back, voice steady through the mic. 2 years ago, this was an abandoned housing area. Today, thanks to hands unafraid of scars, we have a home for those who once lived in fear. And the one who reminded us to believe that is the girl we all love, Lily Parker. Applause thundered like waves. Lily stepped out, long hair tied neatly, in a simple white dress, old necklace still around her neck. She looked around, saw Hawk, Joe, Karen, and the 100 familiar bikers standing there, eyes wet. She took a deep breath, voice light but clear through the mic. "I was 13 when I asked for help. I didn't ask for mercy. I asked for an ending. But what I got was a beginning." The crowd went silent, only wind rustling the flags. She paused, eyes on the bikers lined outside the gate, voice lowering stronger. "They didn't kill my stepfather. They killed my fear." A sob rose from the audience. She smiled, continued, "And they taught me that real men protect, not destroy." Those words rang out, falling into every heart present. An old biker bowed his head, tears on his cheeks. Karen covered her mouth, and Joe, beside Hawk, lightly touched his hand to steady herself. Then applause exploded, starting with a boy in the front row, spreading like a wave. The yard filled with sound, clapping blending with Harleys, starting outside the gate, engines mixing with sobs, shouts of "Ride for her." Lily bowed her head, tears falling but still smiling, small hands clutching the smudged speech notes. Hawk stood still, saying nothing, just nodding. In the bright noon light, his face held a pride only those who had lost much could understand. Joe leaned in, whispering, "You did it, Rick." Hawk didn't look at her, eyes on the stage, voice low, light as wind. "No, the kid did." The ceremony continued with the ribbon cutting. "Lily, Hawk and Joe held the red ribbon taut before the center gate. When the scissors cut, hundreds of engines started at once, the roar echoing like a protective vow. Confetti shot into the sky, sun shining through, making them sparkle like angel wings. Lily turned, met Hawk's eyes. He nodded slightly, a rare smile on his lips. "Thank you," she said softly, "just for him. For showing me that not all angels have wings." Hawk chuckled, replied, "And not all devils wear leather." They laughed together, light as breath after a storm. As the ceremony ended, people dispersed, children running and laughing. Joe stood by the gate, watching the crowd leave, heart full. She turned to Hawk. "See, from pain, we built the most beautiful thing." Hawk nodded, eyes following Lily, bending to talk to a small boy, hand on his shoulder. The same gesture Hawk had done for her a year ago. "That girl is proof," he said, "that sometimes justice doesn't need a courtroom. It just needs faith, and people willing to stand in the rain." Wind blew, the Angels Haven Foundation flag flying, sunlight reflecting on the words below. "For every child who thought no one would come." Hawk looked up, hand tightening on his helmet, eyes seeming to say something he didn't need to voice. Lily looked back, saw him still there, smiled, raised her hand in salute, sunlight haloing her faintly. In that moment, Hawk saw the old soldier in himself again, saw the faith he thought buried with years of loss. And as the bikers formed up to leave, he turned to Joe, said softly, "Let's ride." Joe smiled. "Always." Harleys roared again, wind kicking up road dust, and behind, Lily stood on the center steps, eyes shining, following the fading convoy, in the golden sun, heart echoing forever, the roar of those who taught her courage, true love and freedom. In the months after the inauguration, the name Angels Haven Foundation spread across Arizona like a symbol of reborn faith. Every weekend, Lily and Joe hit the road, visiting children's camps, schools, shelters for abuse victims. She carried little luggage, just a small notebook, an old mic, and the photo with Hawk from opening day. Whenever the bike stopped at a new place, kids rushed out, half curious, half wary. They had heard the story of the girl lost in the rain and the bikers who never left, but seeing Lily in the flesh, gentle smile, kind eyes, they knew it wasn't just a tale. In a small hall in Winslow, Lily stood before dozens of children and social workers, Joe in the front row, eyes watching. She started slowly, voice light as wind. "I once thought no one would come. That night, I wished to die rather than live. But they came, not angels with wings, just people in leather, full of scars, full of mistakes, and they saved me." Everyone was silent, some kids looking down, hiding tears. Lily continued, "They taught me no one is too broken to be better, and no one is too small to be loved." When she finished, applause rose, not loud but deep, like a whispered thank you to someone who stepped out of darkness. After each talk, Joe always waited outside. They got on the bike. Joe starting the silver Harley, low rumble filling the golden afternoon. "You did great," Joe said. Eyes on the road ahead, Lily leaned her head on her back, smiling. "You think anyone believes bikers teach kids about kindness?" Joe laughed, voice gravelly but warm. "The world's crazy, kiddo, but sometimes the lost ones know the way home best." And so they went through towns, from red sand Sedona to sun-drenched Prescott, leaving behind camps of laughter instead of tears. The press called Lily the voice of the angels, but to her, the title didn't matter. What mattered was every time she saw a child lift their head, dare to smile, she knew she was giving back what was given. One late afternoon, they stopped in the desert off Route 66. The sun sank slowly behind the mountains, golden light like honey on the ground. Joe stopped the bike, turned. "It's late. We should head back." Lily nodded, but didn't get on right away. She looked far, where the road stretched endless, wind tossing her hair. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes I think, what if they hadn't opened the door that night?" Joe looked at her, eyes gentle. "They always open. You just need the courage to knock." They were quiet a moment. Then Joe chuckled. "All right, if you don't get on, Hawk will come looking." Lily laughed too, climbed on, hugged Joe's back, the familiar safety flooding back. They rode through the sunset, wind carrying warm earth and gasoline. Back at the Haven, Hawk stood in the yard, arms crossed, gaze distant. He was the same, faded leather, silver-streaked hair, and a half-smile that was real. "You two are late," he said, voice stern, but hinting laughter. Joe shrugged. "Blame this one, talked so much the whole town stayed to listen." Hawk looked at Lily, eyes softening. "Telling stories, just the truth." she replied. That good people hide behind engine noise. Hawk smiled faintly, gestured to his bike. Come on, one last lap before dark. Lily didn't ask. She climbed on back, gripped his jacket. The Harley started, low growl filling the dusk. They shot down the road out of town, wild fields glowing on both sides. No one spoke the whole way, just wind and the steady engine. At a quiet stretch, Hawk slowed, voice carrying through the wind. You know why we never forget that rainy night? Lily leaned on his back, answered softly. Because you saved me. Hawk shook his head, wind tossing his hair, voice low, warm to the core. No, kid, you saved us. She smiled, eyes blurring. Far off, the haven's lights began to glow, small but bright in the twilight, and as they turned back, the Harley echoed through the valley, blending with the heartbeat of two people who found each other not by blood, but by compassion. The only thing that can turn pain into light. Sunset poured over Route 66 like a carpet of fire, gilding the pines, power poles, and the faces of those preparing to ride. 100 bikers lined the road, leather jackets reflecting the day's last sun. Hell's Angels logos like wings spread in the red glow. In the middle, Lily sat on Hawk's Harley, small leather jacket etched Angel's daughter, hair flying in the wind, eyes bright and calm. She looked around, saw Joe, Sam, Karen, all who had walked with her through darkness, now here, on this road, in the light of a day ending and a new life beginning. Hawk adjusted his gloves, turned, voice cutting the wind. Ready? Lily nodded. Always. Engines roared in unison, the sound shaking not just the air but the ground beneath. Harleys blended with heartbeats, steady, strong, free. The convoy rolled out, slow then accelerating, long line of headlights cutting through the sunset, reflecting on the road in orange like a steel galaxy. Lily wrapped arms tight around Hawk's back, feeling the engine heat, old leather and gasoline, the scent now of life, safety, home, far ahead. Joe led the right wing, Sam the left, riding like a military formation, orderly and proud. Wind rushed past ears, carrying the sound of freedom. No more cries, no more fear, just engine roar like music for those who fell but rose again. Lily looked up at the sky, where the last sun streaks drifted toward the horizon. In her mind, fragments of that rainy night rushed back. The knock, Hawk's eyes, Joe's hand, and the promise, we protect. She understood it all started there from the moment those called outlaws chose to be angels. The road opened ahead Fitzgerald, no destination, only journey. The bikers rode through small towns, people on both sides stopping, waving, some kids holding scribbled signs. Thank you, angels. Another girl in a ride for her shirt ran after, shouting, we love you, Lily. She smiled, waved back, heart full of feeling, light as wind, deep as earth. Hawk spoke over his shoulder, voice mixing with the engine. See, what we plant doesn't need a badge, Lily answered, breath in the wind, because badges fade, but kindness doesn't. Hawk laughed, the sound lost in the roar, but Lily heard it clear. The convoy continued, over bridges, winding hills, past faded old signs. The western sky blazed red-orange, shining through hundreds of mirrors into a streaked light beautiful to breathless. From afar, the camera panned out, capturing the majestic scene, 100 bikers in long formation on legendary Route 66. Behind them endless desert and the sun sinking to the horizon. The narrator's voice rose, deep, warm, slow, like retelling an old story to those who forgot compassion still exists. The law failed her once but the road didn't, because sometimes angels ride Harleys. The voice faded into the wind, giving way to the unified engine acceleration. The convoy rode farther, leaving only dust mixing with the fiery sunset. Hawk and Lily in the middle, two figures shrinking in the frame, blending into the orange sun, where sky and earth met in one line of light. No past, no fear, only the journey of people once forgotten, now carrying justice wherever their wheels rolled. The camera pulled back farther, until the Harleys were just tiny lights, like fireflies over endless prairie. Then light dimmed, engine sound dissolved into space, only the fiery sky cooling. The screen faded to black, and white words appeared on the dark, based on the spirit of true brotherhood and mercy. The final sound was a distant engine echo, not an ending, but the heartbeat of human-shaped angels, still riding forever on the road of compassion and freedom. If you believe kindness can change the world, hit subscribe to join us on the journey of the angels on two wheels. Thank you for riding along. See you in the next story, where justice still revs and hearts still lead the way.